Joking, I'm gonna die.
Don't die. Don't die. We don't know where you'll go.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Taming of Tolkien. Today we are delving into the actual story of the Simlarillion, which is the Quinta Simlarillion, aka the history of the Silmarils. And we're starting with the very first chapter, which is of the beginning of days. And let me tell you, I skipped part of this chapter.
We just spent 30 minutes debating this chapter, so...
I have no shame in admitting that I legitimately skipped an entire page of this chapter because I couldn't get through it.
A lot of description and a lot of names, and if you're not into that sort of thing, it'd be difficult.
Especially when you don't know how to pronounce things.
It's not that hard.
I just see a lot of letters with a lot of accent marks, and I'm just like, alrighty, moving along.
I found my Languages of Tolkien book, by the way. So that's going to get pulled out eventually. It's downstairs. So
I mean, if you want me to try and attempt these names, I have no problems attempting some of these names.
Well, I did not put a lot of these names in my summary because I didn't think they were important.
Good, they're not.
In this chapter, if you recall from a previous episode, Melkor/Morgoth, because I can't call him one or the other, he made it difficult for the Valar to create this beautiful world that they had seen in the music, right? So that's pulling from Prelude 2, Prelude 1, something or other.
Prelude 1.
And then, 1?
I think it's in both.
Yeah. So Melkor is constantly going around destroying work, and they're trying to rebuild it, and like something between absolute destruction and perfection is being built as Ea, the earth. Tolkien, one of the Valar, he is it? I can't remember who he was. I didn't write it down. I think he's the war god, right?
Yeah, he's Ares.
Yeah, he's the war god. He is the one that comes and essentially saves the day.
Wait. Speaking of, because we did not do this at the beginning, I do have a meme for this. The first one. Which is even funnier because it's Benedict and Martin who are both in...
It's Benadryl Cabbage Patch.
It's broccoli casserole. Me describing my love for Lord of the Rings. My friend's reaction. Every time.
Pretty sure I make these faces every time we have one of these episodes. So.
Right.
This next one should be like our cover art forever.
It really should be.
The Lord of the Rings and then Silmarillion. It is absolutely perfect.
It is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, we're down here at the bottom. We're working on the Lord of the Rings.
We'll get there. Now the next one was kind of funny. This is like a little comic from Inaj. I don't know how to say their name. N-N-A-J. About Mandos, because there's a restaurant named Nandos. So it's, who dare stand before Mandos, doomsman of the Valar, keeper of the houses of the dead. I'll have one whole chicken extra hot, garlic bread and chips for the side, and a Diet Coke. And Mandos is all upset. I am Mandos, not Nandos.
I don't know what Nandos is.
I don't know either.
I'm assuming it's a restaurant.
Yeah, it's something we don't have here in America. Here, let me double check. I'm pretty sure it's a restaurant. It's a fast food place. They might actually have it here in America. They don't have it out here in the Midwest. Oh, it's South African.
Oh, okay.
We don't have it out here.
Still funny.
Yeah, and then here, this next one is perfect for you because you keep going back and forth on their names.
Melkor just isn't scary enough. I should be called something more goth. Exactly.
All right, and then, so those are me before, and then now, the next two are Tolkien entering the party and ending it.
Cool. All right.
Well, you just finished that part, right?
No, I got like
Oh.
4 words in.
Didn't I swear? Okay, it's okay. You can just edit it together.
So anyway, the they're doing this battling, right? And Tulkas, the war god, comes in and essentially fights off Morgoth / Melkor. He gets the upper hand and he chases Morgoth away.
I think you're describing this a little bit more in favor of Morgoth and not the fact that he ran away like a scared little baby.
I'm just generalizing it. I'm not giving details. This is just what happened. But yes.
He heard the laughter of Tulkas and turned around and ran. That is verbatim what happened.
It's very true. I was just giving the briefest of summaries. There's so much more detail in this chapter.
But it sounds better when you explain what actually happened. There wasn't any fighting on Tulkas and Melkor's side. It was literally just Melkor hearing him and turning around and running.
Yeah, he ran away, scared.
So now we have 2 memes about this.
Melkor hearing the laughter of Tulkas throughout Arda, 1499 Valian years after the arrival of the Ainur.
This is the last to arrive. That's literally it. Now the next one is great. This is beautiful fan art, and it's Morgoth saying, "I have an army," and Manwë saying, "We have a Tulkas." That's
a good one. I wish there was like a third one of him just like wide-eyed, terrified looking.
Just full on hunter run. Yeah.
Run away.
Beautiful. All right, anyways, continue.
Okay. So Morgoth runs away and he hides and he broods over his defeat, whining about it, and grows to hate Tulkas. Apparently before this he didn't. Now he does. So after Morgoth, the Valar finish creating the earth. It's not perfect. It's very much flawed, but it is what it is. They grew plants and created, and they didn't say that they created animals. It said animals came, but I'm assuming they created animals. And my favorite part about this like world design is that for light, they put up 2 lamps. They created these lamps and they put them up on 2 pillars.
Huge. Yeah, they're massive.
Yeah. And it's so that there is never darkness. There's never darkness. That's what it's described. And then where the light of the 2 lamps meet is where they create the Isle of, what the hell is that word? Elmarin?
You were asking me.
I can't read my own handwriting.
You forgot to mention that they put them basically on the South Pole and the North Pole.
Not gonna lie, in this version, I'm imagining it being a flat Earth.
Well, because it is a flat Earth.
Exactly. So like with a lamb on each side. Anyway, so the name doesn't matter. I can't read my own handwriting. But where?
Hold on, wait, because he even names the freaking lamps. Why you need to know what the lamps are named? I don't know, but he names them.
That's why I didn't write down the names.
Where does it say that he talks about the area where they meet? Oh yeah, Elmarin or Elmarian?
Elmarin or Elmarian?
Almaren.
Elmarin. All right, so I did write it correctly. It's just the R got lost in my handwriting. So in between where the lights of the 2 lamps blended, they created the Isle of Elmarin in the Great Lake, which became the first home of the Valar. And this is where they rested after toiling, creating the world. So in celebration, what?
I said not all of them rested.
We're not there yet. I mean, yeah, they actually all do rest.
No, they specifically mentioned 2. It's later mentioned.
And then they rest, and that's the problem. I'm getting there.
Oh.
Anyway, so they rested. And to celebrate their victory, I guess, by finishing the creation of the world, they decided to throw a feast.
They throw a party. You could say.
They throw a party. But yes, there are 2 Valar. Tulkas is one of them. And
Owlet, the one I can never remember how to
Owlet?
say.
I didn't write it down. But yeah, so they have never taken a break this entire time, where the other Valar have taken breaks off and on. They had to constantly be fighting Melkor, but now that everything's done, they're very, very tired. So they still attend this feast, but they're exhausted. Now Melkor, he had spies, which were creatures in Maiar that he had already corrupted, and he heard about the completion of the Valar's work and this feast that was going on. The feast made him even angrier and jealous at the Valar, because how dare you party when I'm stuck here brooding. So he gathers up an army of these corrupted creatures and casts a shadow in the north of Middle Earth. Is it Middle Earth? What? Yes, it's Middle Earth. I wasn't sure if they called it that yet, but they do. So he goes to the north of Middle Earth and with his army, and it casts a shadow, but the Valar are so distracted by this feast, they don't notice that he has taken up residence in the north. And with Tolkien and Aule being so tired, they also let their guard down and they go to sleep. And Melkor finds this out, that his greatest fear, whose laughter made him tremble in his little space boots,
Run.
He finds out Tolkien isn't sleeping, and he decides that this is the time to act. So he springs into action. He moves himself and his army. This is where it is. So he just went to the north, and then he moved himself and his army back into Middle Earth and built a fortress underground, which he named Utumno.
Oh, is that how you say that? I had no idea how to say that.
His hatred, so like he escapes, he builds this fortress, no one notices. He's getting stronger, and his hatred is growing even more, and it flows out from this fortress and just starts to rot the earth around it. Plants start to decay, animals start to grow horns and go wild, and says that they stain the earth with their blood. So I'm assuming they start to fight.
He also disgustingly mentions that the water becomes slime.
So all I'm imagining is this is the beginning of Mordor, right? Like nothing grows around Mordor, well, this is why. And also the forests around there turn dark and evil and start to house a lot of these creatures, which makes me think of Mirkwood.
That was my exact thought when I was reading this. I was like, this sounds like Mirkwood.
Because that's what happens to Mirkwood, is the shadow of Mordor corrupts it. And this is Melkor, Morgoth, is essentially the shadow. It's his hatred. So, because the world is rotting, the Valar take notice, and they go to hunt Melkor down. But Melkor does a surprise attack. And because, again, they were taken off guard, they're looking for him, surprise attack, and he leaps up and destroys the two lamps. He doesn't attack the Valar. He goes for their source of light, because we know the Valar love light, right? He hates it. Melkor hates it. So he destroys the
why
two
he
lamps.
stays here if he hates it, but here we are.
He hates it.
He doesn't. I don't understand.
So this is the, I guess, oil. I think they called it liquid specifically. It was in the lamps, tumbling to the earth, and it sort of throws everything into a frenzy. So where the oil hits, fires start, the oceans start to rage, there are earthquakes, the ground starts to crack. So the Valar are now focused on trying to stop the destruction of Ea. But Melkor, after he destroys the lamps, runs and hides back into his fortress again.
He does what he's good at.
He heard / felt Manwë and Tolkien coming for him.
Just remember, he's not scared of a lot of things, but he is terrified of Varda, and he is terrified of Tolkien.
Remember, evil's always a coward.
Yeah.
So he goes, breaks the lamps, goes and hides. The Valar decide not to chase him down because their focus is completely on trying to stop this destruction. However, this time period is called, before this happened, it was called the Spring of Arda, and this is how the Spring of Arda ends. That's what I call section 1. It's not broken out into sections, but essentially that's a good, like,
Well,
halfway point.
it kind of is. He has like a break. There's like a little gap, at least in my book. There's like a gap in between this, because then the next part, it literally starts with the line, "Thus ended the Spring of Arda." And there's like a little gappy.
I don't think I do, but I do have a picture for this one. If you would also like to see.
I would, but yeah, see, looky. There's a gap.
Huh. I don't know that this is important. I remember reading this and specifically leaving it out, but also during this time is when the count of time technically begins. Anyway.
Well, that happens with the trees.
Is it the trees?
Yeah. They're on 6-hour cycles.
Let's get to that.
Another part that I skipped.
One of the lamps.
It's so pretty.
Isn't it neat?
That's a bright ass lamp.
A lamp. This book is awesome. I like the pictures. Anyway, yeah, I didn't comment on the count of time in my notes, so I should probably stick to what I wrote down.
I'll tell you when it happens. Oh no, wait, you said you skipped that part.
I did. Anyway, so the next section of the book, chapter? It's not really a section.
Chapter.
Anyway, so Almarin, the home of the Valar, is completely destroyed during this thing. And they decide that they've had enough with, because this is Middle Earth, they decided they've had enough with Middle Earth, they've had enough with Melkor, and they actually leave Middle Earth and go to the westernmost land that they could find, which is the land of Amen, which during our 30-minute discussion today is the Undying Lands, the continent.
Yeah, this was a whole, yeah.
Yeah, so within Aman, they create a giant mountain for Manwë's throne, and they create Valinor, which is the new home of the Valar, which is what probably most Lord of the Rings people know is the name Valinor, which is what we think of when we think of the Undying Lands, but it's all of it, apparently.
Yeah.
And they all the Valar sort of like make their own residences. They more or less forget about Middle Earth and they focus on Aman, except for Yavanna. Yavanna is sad over the damage of Middle Earth, and she continuously goes back to try and heal the damage that Melkor has done. And every time she comes back, she tries really hard to convince the other Valar to return to Middle Earth and help restore it.
Which, if you don't remember Yavanna, she is the Demeter, so she's the one who makes the plants.
Right, and so she's constantly doing what she can to make Middle Earth better. Weirdly enough, during this time, and I went back and I reread this section, and maybe I missed it, but then they start to talk about the elves. And I didn't see anywhere where it actually said that they had arrived, like a specific moment of this is how the elves were created.
I know he talks about like what the elves call certain things, because this particular passage is when he just word vomits every possible name of a location, whether it means anything to you or not. Hence why I skipped this part. This is part of what I skipped.
Okay, so Tolkien starts talking about the elves. I don't recall reading anything specific about how they were created or why or whatever. He
explains that later, but yeah, in this part he talks about like the Tanaquintil, the elves name the holy mountain. Like he talks about like what the elves call this stuff on top of their actual names, and then like the titles of Manwë, and I'm like, what?
And he starts talking about how the elves made something for each Valar. I didn't really write any of this detail down because it's not really important, but they did. It's really
I don't know.
It's for the main gist of the background. It's not important that the elves made something for the Valar. I don't think it ever comes up again. But anyway, so the elves come to Valinor, and we find out that they were created close to the likeness of the Ainur, but Ilúvatar gives them the gift of bliss. essentially. They have been given this gift of being able to have the most bliss when comparing against the children of Iluvatar, which is men and elves. Yeah, it is men and elves. I wanted to say it was something else. Yeah, so it's men and elves. So we find out that is their gift. And with that, they are immortal. They never age unless they kind of decide to. When they die, they go back to the Undying Lands. And then after a while, they're actually sent back to Middle Earth. They're forever tied to the world. That is the curse, I guess, of their gift, is they're forever tied to it. We also find out that men, though they have not arrived yet, will come with the second music of the Aener. And Iluvatar also gives them a gift, which is death. And with this gift, I feel like this is their cursed side of this gift, is they're now cursed, in my opinion, to never be content with Arda. They can never be happy with the world. They constantly strive for something more and something greater. Iluvatar thinks this is a gift. He thinks this sort of drive is wonderful. And by giving them such a short lifespan, it puts more fire into that drive and will, propel them into doing something great. But then he also sees the flip side of that men will be corrupted because they're easily corrupted, kind of because of the drive and their short lifespan. But oh well.
Yeah, pretty much. He's like, I see this, but it'll all come to fruition in my favor. It's fine.
Yeah, but I'm just like, I'm reading it, I'm like, why is this you give elves the gift of eternal bliss, but you give men the gift of
because Iluvatar's a dick.
What?
So it's because Iluvatar's a dick.
Kind of. However, you find out that the elves kind of envy the short lifespan of men because they are here, they're gone, and then they kind of like they're able to essentially escape, whereas they're always forever tied. And after they've lived for so long, it gets weary and blah blah blah. All the things they say is sad about immortality that I'm like, well, I'd like to try it once.
Yeah. You didn't really touch on it, but he does specifically mention how an elf can die. There's only 2 ways that an elf can die, and it is they are killed, so they are slain, or they can die of grief. Which, if you have seen the Hobbit movies, this has no bearing whatsoever on the books, exclusively to the Hobbit movies, Battle of the Five Armies, when they kind of mention Legolas's mother, which also was part of our 30-minute discussion about how Tolkien literally never mentions Legolas's mother. She has no name. We have no idea who the fuck she is or if she's even still alive. He literally didn't think she was important, which Arai here has said is a grievous oversight. But Thranduil talks about, like how she, I guess, alludes to the fact that she died from an orc attack, and that's why his face is all fucked up and stuff. But the reason why he doesn't show love and emotion is because the moment that he does, he will immediately feel that grief, and that would be how he would actually die, which is why he is so cold-hearted. Because elves can die from grief, which is I have a total meme about this too, and I didn't even think to put it in here. Hold on. Give me.
While you're looking for that meme, technically there's a third way, but it's very specific to what you would call half elves, like Arwen.
He doesn't. Yeah, I said which he doesn't explain that really that there's half elves.
It's more of a fandom conclusion that there are half elves, but there is a third way. It's only specific to Arwen and her line, but it's because supposedly there might be a taint of mortal blood or something. I think it gets into it a little bit more later, but maybe not as much. But that's why she's able to choose between mortal and immortal, though her mortal life is still much, much longer than your typical human, and it would still be much longer than your typical what's Aragorn?
Numeron.
Numenor, right?
Dunedain, yeah.
Dunedain, yeah. So he has an extended life because there's a little bit of elf blood in him. His life is super long. He could have lived much longer before he decided to just give up and go to sleep, but that's another story. But yeah, so technically there's one little footnote to the 2-way rule, but they can still be sent back. They dwell into the Undying Lands, and then they're sent back. Min, though, it does not go into the description about exactly what happened. That's what we were talking about before this. It's like I could have sworn it was somewhere. Yeah, there's no description in this.
No. All right, so this is related to Lord of the Rings, but it kind of ties into this whole elves can die of grief concept. It's like this whole headcanon on a Tumblr.
So long.
I know it is. You're gonna have to like zoom in. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was quite that long, but it is hilarious talking about it. So, concept. Sam finds out that elves can die of sadness, gets very concerned, starts doing his best to make sure Mr. Legolas is happy all the time, just in case. This causes a terrible dilemma when Legolas expresses that he'd prefer not to be addressed as Mr. Legolas, and Sam doesn't want to risk upsetting him, but also that goes against everything he knows. Mr. Highness Greenleaf, sir. Oh, Mr. Greenleaf, sir? Mr. Green? Mr. Leaf? That's what his name means. Legolas and Gimli fighting as usual. Stop! You leave Mr. the elf alone, Mr. Gimli. Legolas, why thank you, Sam. You see, Gimli, your dwarven rudeness has even upset Sam. Sam sobbing, he can't take such a talking to, Mr. Gimli. He's such a sensitive soul. Much more of that, and he'll be dead by morn.
Oh my gosh.
Aragorn, Sam, don't worry. It takes a lot more sorrow than that to kill an elf. Sam, but these are really sad times. Aragorn, excuse me.
Sam, these are really sad times.
We're all very upset all the time because of the quest. What if something small is what pushes him over the edge? Aragorn, it doesn't work like that. Legolas, genuinely panicked. What if it works like that? I'm sure it doesn't. Legolas, you had a point. I am very upset all the time. Gandalf, Legolas, I assure you, no elf has ever died like that. Legolas, not yet they haven't.
Oh my god, Legolas has my anxiety disorder.
Sam and Legolas both panicking. If elves get sad, they die. So if I was an elf, I would be dead. What do elves even get sad about? Current events.
Oh, that was good.
That was worth me finding it. That was worth me finding it.
So that's all of my notes. I completely glanced over like this massive section about I think it's Yavanna and 2 special trees.
Yeah. That I'm going to talk about actually.
There we go. My summary is all you technically need to know about the events. We're about to get into it's really beautiful description of this moment. It just wasn't relevant.
It's very wordy. Okay, he literally has a word in here talking about this council, and I kid you not, you can put this up on the screen so everyone can see. It's Mahannaxar.
Hold it.
The fuck?
I have to figure out where this is at. Thus ended the spring. Oh, there was a space for thus ended the spring of Arda.
This is after the 3 dots at the bottom, after the spring of Arda. It's in that next paragraph.
Is it?
Yes.
All right, so we're looking for not the outer sea.
It starts with when Valinor was full rot and the mansions of the Valar were established.
Oh wait, there's my 3 dots.
Yeah,
Valinor was full rot and they're established. Which word was it? Was it the Western Gate?
The Ring of Doom. Oh yeah, also the Green Mound is also another ridiculous name.
Mahannaxar?
Ezalahar?
What?
Yeah, that was one. The Western Gate, the Green Mound, Ezalahar, and then like that is also named Corollary? Corollary?
Lyre.
This is why I skipped like this entire section. That's not even all of the names.
Lyre.
that are introduced. I don't know why Yavanna has Kimintari after her name. It's never explained. I don't
Everyone has a million names. That's just her surname. One of them.
Yeah, they like.
I don't know what it means though.
It's never explained. I don't understand it. Why does he have to name the lamps? I don't get it. This is my rant. This is why Tolkien is so hard to read. Why does he name lamps? I don't know, but he does.
Because he was a linguist. He loves languages.
Anyways.
All right, I'm here for you.
What I wanted to talk about, I know you glanced over it, and that's okay because I wanted to go a little bit more into detail about this. So we mentioned, like, when they're talking about the destruction of Almarin, that it reminded us of Mirkwood, with it being all dark and everything. So when they were rebuilding Armand.
Wait, what? Wait. I just don't know what word we're trying to say here.
The new home of the Valar. I didn't write this part down. I literally just wrote down the quotes.
Almarin was destroyed, so that's their old home.
Amon.
Valinor is their new home.
Right, but they go to the eastern shores of Amon. So they go way
Amon.
Okay, so in this whole section, mixed in with all of these names, they talk about, well, he, not they. It's not they.
Well, it's the elves technically recounting.
True. So they talk about what it looks like. And when I was reading this, it made me immediately think of a very specific moment in the movies that they put in the movies to replace a scene that they took out from the books. But it's the same thing. So I didn't highlight this. So no, hold on. I gotta find it. Okay, I gotta find it. Where was it? I marked the book page. Oh, okay, here we go. So behind the walls of the Pelori, which you did not talk about, but that is the name of the mountains that they erect for Amon. So behind the walls of the Pelori, the Valar established their domain in that region, which is called Valinor, and there were their houses, their gardens, and their towers. In that guarded land, the Valar gathered great store of light and all the fairest things that were saved from the ruin, and many others yet fairer they made anew, and Valinor became more beautiful even than Middle-earth in the spring of Arda. And it was blessed, for the deathless dwelt there, and there not faded nor withered, neither was there any stain upon flower or leaf in that land, nor any corruption or sickness in anything that lived, for the very stones and waters were hallowed. Okay, so there is that little bit. And then over on the next page, after all of the words, because we don't care about those names, they talk about how they like sit there for a moment and have this moment of silence, and then Yavanna starts singing. And while she sings, these two trees grow from the ground, and this is where they start the counting of times from these trees. But I wanted to talk specifically about one of the trees. So they come as these little shoot saplings, and then as she continues to sing, they grow and grow and grow, and they do have a name. I don't care about the names. What I do care about is
Hilperion and Laurelin.
Thank you. Again, I don't care about their names, but the one had leaves of dark green that beneath were as shining silver, and from each of his countless flowers a dew of silver light was ever falling, and the earth beneath was dappled with the shadows of his fluttering leaves. That specifically is what I wanted to talk about before going into it. And then I talk about the time, which I don't really care about. So when I was reading this and listening to all of this, it immediately made me think of the scene in
Return of the King.
Is it in Return of the King? Okay, I had to think. I was like, what battle are they in? Okay, so in Return of the King, when Pippin and Gandalf have their moment, and Pippin says, I didn't think it would end this way. Gandalf says, end? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. Lies, Gandalf, but I digress. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it. What, Gandalf? See what? White shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise. Which he is, in fact, talking about the Undying Lands. We're not going to go into the specifics of what he was actually talking about. That's one other story. But in the movies, they have that scene. That's not how this is. That doesn't happen in the books. In the books, they have a character named Tom Bombadil who they completely cut from the movies for the sake of moving the story along.
He was not necessary to the plot.
Yeah.
in movie world.
Yeah, it would have taken too long. They needed to move the plot along in the very beginning. They encounter him right when they leave the Shire. So just imagine that Shire scene just extending further. It was unnecessary. But in the books, Frodo has a dream that night when they stay with Tom Bombadil. And the dream is that night they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which, Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. And then in the Return of the King book, we get this again from Frodo, and it is, the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that, as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the gray rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. And that is all because they're talking about the same place, which is why if you read it or like listen to our summary and you're like, oh, that like rings a bell, that's why. They're talking about the same place. Remember, Gandalf is a Mayor. He has been there. He has spent time there. So what comes across in the movies is a very comforting moment. Excuse you, windows. That was rude. That was rude. I'm not updating. Thank you. What comes across as a very like comforting moment to people who have not read the books, or even who have read the books but have not read the Simlarillion, is that he's comforting him and telling him what lies beyond when you die. Now, Gandalf being a Mayor knows that mortals will never experience this. There are exceptions. There are exceptions. But mortals will never experience the Undying Lands. That is not something that they are gifted with. They are gifted with a short life, which means that they will not ever go there. So him explaining this, he knows that this is not something that Pippin will achieve. Spoiler alert, Pippin does. It's okay. But it's like that moment of comfort. But when you have that knowledge that he's literally just lying to Pippin to comfort him, it, to me, shows that whole, like you were saying in the last episode about Gandalf and grief and pity, and that he has spent so much time around it that he like feels the need to comfort those, even if it's a blatant lie, such as this, where he's like, I know that you will never see this.
We know they don't go to the Undying Lands. We just don't exactly know what happens to a mortal, to their soul or whatever. So I'm pretty sure the answer is somewhere. I just have to find it.
But Gandalf is specifically talking about the Undying Lands to Pippin with the full knowledge that under normal circumstances, Pippin will never see it. But it gives comfort to Pippin, or, you know, in the books, Frodo has this like comfort, of this like vision, if you will, and then he finally sees it when he makes the trip as a ring bearer to the Undying Lands. That was really what I wanted to talk about. That part really stuck with me. That one, and then the fact that he talks about how he knows what elves' purpose is in the world, but he has yet to reveal what men's purpose is.
Specifically, what will happen to the elves when the world ends, because elves are specifically tied to the world.
Mm-hmm. So they get to come back.
Melkor/Morgoth has not figured it out yet.
No, but yeah, it's an interesting one. He starts off with this beautiful thing and then just ends with death. But that is a very common theme in his works, is death, which makes sense. He was in World War I, so like he experienced a lot of it in his life.
So there was one thing I wanted to talk about in the very first prelude, the music of the Einar, that I totally forgot about. But now we're talking about death in the Undying Lands. It makes perfect sense to bring it up here. I've been waiting for this moment. And that is the call of the sea that the elves get. So the elves, if you ever read the appendices specifically about Legolas, when the elves see the ocean, it immediately awakens the call of the sea within them, where they are no longer content to remain where they are. They are drawn to essentially go to the Undying Lands. So that's what they're drawn to do. They're drawn to leave the earth. Legolas, he and Gimli go on adventures after Lord of the Rings, and he gets a glimpse of the ocean, and it awakens that in him, and he fights it for as long as he can, but eventually he can't fight it anymore.
And he kidnaps and takes Gimli with him to the Undying Lands. And Gimli becomes...
I think Gimli was like, I'm not leaving you.
He's the one and only dwarf to ever make it there. I feel like they just made an exception. They were like...
They made an exception for the 9. You know, they played a big role in bringing down Melkor, Morgoth, Sauron, where he was today.
Does Sam go there?
Yeah, he does.
Does No, Aragorn doesn't go there.
No, Aragorn stayed. I'm not saying they all went, but essentially, like, that group of people, if Aragorn had wanted to go, they probably would have let him in. So Frodo, Bilbo,
next to Aragorn.
and Gimli go.
Is Merry buried next to Aragorn?
I don't know about Merry, but Sam, after Rosie dies, goes to Valinor.
One of the hobbits is buried next to Aragorn. Merry and Pippin both are.
The Pippin didn't go. You're wrong. Oops.
You're the one who said he does earlier. So I was right the first time when I said that he does not make it there. They are all 3 buried in the royal tomb of Gondor. And Aragorn outlives both Merry and Pippin.
It's Frodo, Bilbo, and Sam are the 3 hobbits that make it to the Undying Lands. But I specifically reading that it happened after Rosie died.
Yeah, and the reason why, I don't know why they let Sam in, but the reason that they specifically...
He was a ring bearer.
No,
that's literally the exception.
Ring bearer. Like he was a ring bearer for like 2 days.
It doesn't matter. They let ring bearers in.
Except for the dwarven ring bearers, they never make it in.
It's like an apology. Did they even try?
I mean, they were all corrupted, so who the fuck knows?
But anyway, so there's this draw to the sea that I wanted to bring up. It's in the very first prelude that you find out that the reason why they're so drawn to it is within the water is the lingering echo of the first theme or song from the Einar. And when the elves see that, they actually hear that echo of music, and it like sticks with them in their hearts, and they're then drawn to, it's almost like the Valar, the Einar are calling back to them. So technically the elves are not from Middle Earth anyway, so it's like calling them home.
I wonder, because now looking back at these 2 passages, Frodo hears the music. I don't know why he hears it in Tom Bombadil's house, but when he's on the ship, that makes sense because it's the water.
Perhaps the Valar were calling out to him? I don't know. I always skip Tom Bombadil. I didn't like it.
Because the Barrow Downs are fucking horrifying. like, that's some scary shit. I understand why it was cut from the movies, but like if you ever get the chance to read The Fellowship of the Ring, do not skip Tom Bombadil, because that whole scene in the Barrow Downs is utterly terrifying. Like that, he could have made a killing as a horror writer. Like it is beautiful.
To be fair, so like my introduction to Lord of the Rings was the first Lord of the Rings movie. So I didn't read the first book. I went straight to the Two Towers because I had to know what happened next. And then I read The Return of the King. And then I went back and read The Fellowship of the Ring, but I was still watching the movie like every single day. So like it was hard to keep my focus in The Fellowship of the Ring. And when it came to a part that didn't keep my attention, like the Tom Bombadil, I was like, where's more Legolas?
It is very slow paced, but the Barrow Downs, maybe just skip to specifically just the Barrow Downs and just read that section of it, because
well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh yeah, true. You're gonna
So I've read Lord of the Rings. I used to read it once a year for several years. But The Fellowship of the Ring was always the hardest one for me to read. I don't know why. The Two Towers is my favorite out of the three.
It's because The Fellowship of the Ring is super slow.
And there's hobbits. All I want are elves.
Okay, don't hate on my hobbits. Excuse you. Hobbits are majestic creatures. I am a hobbit. Okay.
I'm an elf at heart. Half elf specifically.
Our heights need to be adjusted a little bit, you know?
I mean, I'm pretty tall compared to most of my friends. I've always been the tallest, but I guess that sort of shows how short my friends are.
Yeah, that says a lot about your friends when you're the tallest.
I blame the pesticides in the corn where I grew up. I'm joking. I'm not serious. I just grew up in the middle of fields, and like every summer the pesticides would create like a cloud around the area, and it smelled horrible. Like, so
we have to finish up the last couple of memes that I have.
Oh, me.
This is just Sauron and Melkor getting ready and like them waking up, and then the bottom part is them ready, and Sauron is like primed and perfect and everything, and Melkor just looks the same with armor. Like,
why does Sauron look so fabulous?
Why does Sauron look so what?
Fabulous, like.
Because Sauron is a gift to us. He is a gorgeous being.
Minus the whole evil thing.
Yeah. Anyone who has not read the books just doesn't understand why people want to sleep with Sauron.
I mean, I drool over the armor. So. Sauron was the Maiar to Aule, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And this is Aule. Could any of my Maiar not turn evil for 5 minutes?
It's just Sauron and Saruman. All right, and then this is for this is just a perfect example of what it looks like. Tornado is Middle Earth during the first stage, which we are about to enter. When elves arrive, I believe that's the start of the first stage. So it's just the Valar mowing their grass in Valinor, like nothing is going on in Middle Earth during the first stage, which we all know is a fat lie. With their gate up. I was like, this is perfect.
That guy's like about to shove his lawnmower into a tree.
Don't question it. Don't. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode about our first chapter of the actual Simlarillion. Next week, we're going to cover chapter 2, which is of Aule and Yavanna. And I will have a lot more memes and fan art for this, because I have a lot of stuff for the upcoming, just not this early part, because there's nothing going on.
To be fair, not a lot of people drool over these first few chapters.
Yeah, and then this is also a pretty short one. In my book, it's only 4 pages. It's not the shortest one in this book, but it is pretty short. Breaking it up into chapters is actually pretty handy. I think it's a great way to go about reading this, to just read a chapter at a time and then just kind of like mull it over.
This is not a book that you sit down and read cover to cover. You can. I did it once and it felt like a chore. And it should never feel like a chore because it's actually beautiful work.
It is. Yeah, I think reading it in little spurts like this. And he doesn't write like long-winded chapters in this. Like he
does write long-winded paragraphs.
Okay, I take that back. I just got to one of them that's kind of hefty. That's about the downfall of Numeron. But
Aaron and Luthien is pretty long too.
Yeah, some of them he has a little bit. But anyways, yeah, that's what we're going to discuss next week. We hope to see you guys then.
Bye.